when I actually migrated to Australia, my first job was in a university, not as an academic, but as a coordinator of quality assurance in an institution. So that's where my interest of QA in higher education sort of started. And then while managing or coordinating quality assurance in one university, then I started to establish network of people who have interest in quality assurance. And then once you start to network, then you try to find out who are the possible supervisors who could supervise you if you're doing PhD. So then I started doing my PhD focus on higher education quality assurance. And then since then, once I started my academic career, then that's when I sort of went into deep kind of doing more research in quality assurance, trying to improve practice at workplaces. And my focus has been for many years quality assurance in learning and teaching and also international education. That those are the two areas of my focus in QA. Some of the key trends I've seen, and I've been in quality assurance space in Australian context for about 18 years now. So I've seen policy changes by the government. I've seen institutional changes. I've seen the growth of student population in higher education and how institutions are changing. So some of the things that I'd share with you is one is institutions have continued to improve the governance of QA. So as institutions started and things evolved, they've consistently improved the oversight of quality assurance, meaning that institutions have consistently improved on policy frameworks to improve QA. I think institutions have increasingly used data in decision making. So increasingly they are using sophisticated tools to actually use data to inform decisions that is about financial viability of courses, quality assurance of courses, student experience, research outcomes, and so forth. I think institutions are now or have been sort of linking institutional strategy with QA. Mm-hmm. So while institutions, you develop strategy through a lot of consultation and so forth, but there is focus on QA in terms of getting good outcomes that meet the needs or aligns with institutional targets and also what the external quality agencies and national regulators kind of are looking for. I think there is accountability on leaders these days, and it has been for many years that key leaders in the institutions are accountable for quality assurance, which means someone in the institution has an overarching responsibility, but that responsibility actually goes down to faculties, schools, various campuses, leaders who are responsible for QA. I think it's fair to say that QA policy in Australia particularly has moved from an enhancement-led to a compliance-driven. Mm-hmm. So for many years, our quality assurance system or the external quality agency has been used to sort of using enhancement-led audits, enhancement-led reviews, but now it's more around compliance. There are certain standards and institutions have to provide evidence on how they meet those standards. So it's moved a bit towards compliance regime. I think institutions have very robust quality assurance systems now in place, and there is a cyclical or systematic process of monitoring and reporting and improving. So there's certain committees, structures in the institution where these outcomes are reported and questions are asked about where things are not going well and what needs to change. So there's visibility of it. I think it's fair to say that non-university providers in Australia haven't built capacity for QA, and it's understandable. They're new. Some of them have been in existence for more than 10, 15 years, but there are many new ones who are coming, get accredited, so they require a lot of capacity building for QA, and there's a lot of work that is needed when I sort of reflect on trend a lot of work required in involving students in quality assurance. Involving students in QA doesn't mean you sort of have them in committees and have them in course reviews, but actually it is involving them in co-creating some of the improvements that institutions want to implement. Sometimes students say we are involved when there's failure in the system, but if we were involved in the beginning, we would have given those input which may have helped minimize those failures that may have happened. So I think we have a lot of work to do in this area. I think COVID-19 has provided us a very good example or experience on how we should work closely with students. Once you switch to online learning, the feedback and the voice of students, their perception of teaching is different from the traditional um, teaching and so forth. So it has now given us a good lever to actually work with students very closely to understand insights. The new generation of students, their expectations and experience is quite different from 10, 15 years ago. We tend to set targets to improve student experience, but we haven't really implemented initiatives to achieve those targets. So at an institutional level, you'll find that many institutions would say we want to improve, or we want to have a score of around 85 or 90%, or in the top quartile of universities in certain countries. But really, you can only achieve that once you have got all the nuts and bolts right to be able to achieve those targets. And those things maybe things like professional development, maybe it is setting some recognition reward system to encourage staff to achieve those targets. Maybe they are learning and teaching grants, which is explicitly focused on student experience, that motivates academic peers, interdisciplinary peers to work together to achieve some of those targets. I think there's some institutions or some faculties in schools may have a negative view about student experience, that student experience data cannot be used to judge quality, but in my view, student experience data should be used to raise standards. Standards of course design, standards of assessments, standard of how we provide feedback to students. And now with COVID, there should be standards of online teaching. What are the minimum expectations of institutions on providing quality online delivery? I think there is no doubt that students are always interested to provide feedback in all areas. The challenge for us is to use or to get academics to implement rapid changes. So we may collect data on student experience, and the data is saying that in this particular department, in this particular discipline, the quality of teaching is very low. But as an academic leader in the faculty, the main, we can only bring rapid change if we work with those academics to actually bring about rapid change, so that students can see those changes while they are studying. And they trust that the institution is actually, or the faculty is actually implementing those changes as a result of their voice. And as I said before, students love to be involved. They like their voice to be heard, and they like to see improvements that is informed by them. And the moment they start to see those changes, they will engage constructively. So there's a lot of things that could be done better in terms of not only understanding or gaining insights on student experience, but also working with various stakeholders to actually genuinely improve the experience of students. There are institutions who use data and use vital signs in terms of red flags, orange flags, green flags. There are academic peers who have changed red flag modules or units and turn them to green flag. But at the same time, there are some who can change a very good unit or module from a green flag to a red flag. So it's important that key academic leaders work with um, academics, including sessional staff or casual staff, to understand student experience and to improve over a period of time. Um, I think what you'll find is those institutions that have a history of working in third party arrangement where courses are delivered online, I think they have consistently improved the governance and quality assurance. It all comes down to how their partnerships or agreements were formulated at that time. But I think it's fair to say that institutions have good oversight, but there are a lot of things that needs to be improved. So, for example, um, you look at academic integrity as an example. How do you ensure that any course that is delivered in third-party arrangement, the academic misconduct cases, academic integrity issues are reported and they are dealt with, uh, to ensure that there is no shortcuts uh, happening, or the policy has been followed. Um, Assessment, marking, and standards and moderation. Making sure that they are checked, they are reviewed, and the institution is confident that those moderation and validation and checking is happening. Uh, and also, we tend to sometimes uh, only focus on what the partner organization is doing. Uh, but there are certain things that the institution can also learn from the partner organization. So it's not one way. Sometimes the partner organization is doing something really good that the institution might not be doing good. And I think there needs to be sort of a 360-degree kind of feedback where both parties learn from each other, because there are certain good practices that happens in the partner organization. Sometimes it's always the case that those third-party providers who have expertise and the platform to deliver the course online, they have better technology systems. So there's a lot of things the institution could learn in terms of how they deliver, because these third-party organizations, their course student numbers are huge.
Yeah.
In one particular bachelor degree, you may have 8 to 10,000 students, which the university never in its history was able to attract that number in 1 year. So there is always a tension between uh, growth and quality.
Mm-hmm.
And as a quality practitioner, QA practitioner, one needs to find a very good balance between quality and growth. You could focus on quality and meeting all the ticks and requirements. A very high quality course, very strict admission requirements, but you don't have any students in it. So one needs to find a good balance between growth and also maintenance of quality and standards. I think, I've sort of managed large faculties. Managed meaning I've led learning and teaching in those faculties. These are faculties size ranges from 8,000 to 18,000 students. And then in the school also. So once you manage learning and teaching in a school and then to a faculty and then university, it gives you a very good exposure at different levels. And I think the two things that I'd say in relation to um, this particular question is, one is cultural change. And cultural change in the faculty or a school is not an easy one, because everybody has to be on the board. Everybody has to share the vision and the strategy of the school, university, and faculty. There needs to be good performance review systems so that you can hold academic or professional staff accountable for what we're doing. There needs to be targets set at individual level in terms of what is expected of the role. Reward system in place, recognition, celebrating good practices that we achieve, and disseminating those. And those staff that require help, there needs to be some peer mentoring and support to lift their performance and so forth. So cultural change is very important. Uh, I found that institutions who have not worked towards um, developing a strong culture is institutions that have set strategy and targets, but they haven't really worked on the issue of culture. And that to me is very important. As a dean of the faculty, as a head of the school, you want to really achieve the vision of the university. You really want to make a difference, and you can only do that if your team is supporting you, if your team is on board with the changes that you want to implement. And for that, the cultural change is required. A focus on helping each other, a focus on collaborating with each other, respect peers, and working closely as a team. So I think that is, to me, that is very important. And to me, that is through years of work experience in a number of institutions, I've found that is something very critical. The other one is it is the institution strategy that drives change. So if the institution strategy is loose, if strategy is not based on data and evidence, if strategy is not based on what competitors and what other institutions are doing, what innovation is happening, where the sector is heading, what's the student participation and trends like, then really you're sort of floating and you're not sure what you're going to do. So it's quite important that in QA space, or even it's relevant to quality assurance or strategy, that your strategy is very clear, and that strategy is made very clear to staff at all levels. I think we sort of institutions started to collect feedback from students using paper-based surveys. Then it has moved online, and there are good reasons to go in that direction. Student cohort has changed, modes of delivery have changed, new campuses have been established, new partnerships have been established. There's transnational students studying all over the world. Uh, Institutions have different semester dates. So there's a whole lot of things that has really prompted institutions to use technology. So there are a lot of sophisticated tools out there where you can sort of, some of them are developed in the institution internally, some have outsourced it. But the bottom line is, it's use of online tools or technological tools is much better. You can reach out to students instantly. The chances of manipulation of data is zero. The chances of things that may have happened in a paper-based survey is less in online. So I think that is one of the key change, and it's a good thing to do. And by using technological tools, we are able to analyze the data within few days. So at my university, we do a mid-semester evaluation, which is done in week 4, and in week 5 we get the results. If it was a paper-based survey, we wouldn't be able to do it. So it has, having data is one thing, and being able to report the data in the way that will help an academic staff member is a different thing. And the reporting should be such that it is very easy to interpret. Being an academic does not mean that the person is statistically very smart. So it has to be reported in a way that anybody from any discipline can interpret the data easily and say, all right, I need this area, the scores are less. And then if the score is less, then let's look at the qualitative data, whether the qualitative data actually, sometimes they tell you where the issues are. So I think institutions have done pretty well in using quantitative data. It's easy to analyze, and you can identify the trends and patterns. But I don't think universities have really worked towards using the qualitative data. And to me, qualitative data is more rich. It actually tells you where the red flags are. And sometimes somebody has to manually actually go to it and read it to better understand what's the issue. But I think it's worth doing. uh, Institutions are collecting thousands of qualitative comments every year, or millions even, in a year. And if we are not going through the data, then there's no point collecting it. To gain trust, there's a couple of things that I've found that has worked for me. There will be some staff who will come on board with the changes, and that's the large majority. There will be some staff who may not come on board with the changes that you are implementing. It may be changes around cutting courses. It may be changes around discontinuing courses that were really very close, or the courses that academic staff have developed, and they think even if they had 5 students in that course, it still is, and it's not financially viable, it should still run, So I think decisions around whatever institutions make, it has to be based on evidence so that academic staff are convinced that the trained data suggests that this is something that is not working well and we need to bring about change. Secondly is about relationships. Relationships are very important within the school, faculty, and university. The academic staff need to trust their department head. They need to trust, the department heads need to trust their head of school, and so forth, that they will support us in achieving whatever they want to achieve. Sometimes it's very hard. The institution is struggling financially. I mean, COVID has provided us a good example, international education, and how institutions are now changing their business model and so forth. Sometimes some of the decisions are without consultation, but these are decisions that come from the top, and one needs to support the senior management team in achieving the vision that they want to achieve.